You reach for your coffee and your hand shakes just a little. Maybe no one notices. Maybe you laugh it off. But deep down, something feels different. If you're over 50, this small tremor might be your body's first warning sign, one that too many ignore until it's too late. Don't make that mistake, because what starts as a flicker could turn into something that rewrites the rest of your life. And the worst part, you won't even realize it's happening until the moment you can't button your shirt, sign your name, or hold your grandchild without hesitation. But you still have time. Time to notice, time to respond, and time to reclaim your confidence before it slips away. This is the moment to listen to yourself, because your body's already speaking. You think it's just a moment, a tiny shake, barely enough to spill your coffee. But what if that flicker in your fingers is actually the first whisper of something far more important? Because the truth is, your body rarely screams when something starts going wrong. It whispers. And for seniors over 60, one of the earliest and most overlooked whispers is a subtle hand tremor, the kind you feel only when you're focused, or when your hand is resting, or when you're trying to thread a needle, and suddenly your fingers don't seem to follow your mind quite the way they used to. You might blame it on fatigue, caffeine, or age. You might even joke about it. But here's what most people don't realize: that tremor, that small, almost imperceptible movement, could be your nervous system's quiet cry for attention. And it's not just about your hands, it's about your brain, your spine, your blood chemistry. And when you ignore it thinking, oh, it's nothing, you give it permission to grow. You let the flicker become a shake. You let the shake become hesitation. And you let that hesitation become your new normal. But it doesn't have to be. Because when you understand the story your body is telling you, take the pen back. You start rewriting what happens next. So let's ask the question, no one else is asking, why does this tremor matter? Because a tremor, even a subtle one, is often the very first sign that something inside you is struggling to stay in rhythm. And rhythm matters more than you think. Your hands aren't just tools, they're extensions of your brain's ability to communicate with your muscles, to coordinate, to execute, to express. A change in that connection, even a minor one, suggests that the pathway between your intention and your action is being disrupted. And here's the hook that should stop you in your tracks. By the time a tremor is visible, your body has already been compensating internally for far longer than you think. You see the symptom now, but the shift began months ago, sometimes years ago, quietly. This isn't paranoia, it's physiology. And ignoring it, pretending it's just age, is the very mindset that allows conditions to worsen unchecked. The irony is, most people assume the worst when they feel chest pain or lose their balance, but a small hand tremor, they laugh it off. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Because it doesn't demand your attention, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't stop you from functioning at first, but it plants a seed. And if you don't listen to that seed, it becomes something that grows roots. So where does it come from? That depends. And that's why ignoring it is such a mistake. A hand tremor could be something as simple as essential tremor, a benign but progressive condition, or it could be an early indicator of more serious neurological issues like Parkinson's or medication-induced changes in brain chemistry. It might be tied to anxiety, thyroid function, or even dehydration. And no, this isn't about diagnosing yourself, it's about noticing. Because what happens next depends entirely on whether or not you decide to look deeper. Do you pay attention to when it happens, when you're stressed, when you're still, when you're reaching for something? Do you track what you ate that day, how well you slept, what medications you took, or if you skipped a dose? These aren't random details, they're part of a map. And every time you ignore the tremor, you lose another piece of that map. Until one day, you don't just feel the tremor, you feel slower, foggier, less certain in your hands and your steps. And you wonder when it started, but it started here, in the moment you dismiss the shake. And here's something even more important. Tremors don't just affect how you move, they affect how you see yourself. Because when you start noticing your hands aren't steady, even in subtle ways, you begin to question things you used to take for granted. You hesitate before signing a card. You pass on pouring someone tea. You avoid doing crafts or working with tools. Not because you can't, but because you're not sure anymore. And that doubt, that's the most destructive symptom of all. It begins to change how you show up, how you socialize, how you see your own capability. And no one talks about that part. No one tells you that a tremor can shrink your life, not through pain, but through hesitation. through avoidance, through fear of embarrassment. And that fear becomes silence. And silence becomes isolation. And the very thing that could have been managed, understood, supported, becomes something you carry alone. But what if you didn't carry it alone? What if you took that tremor as a signal, not of decline, but of awareness? What if instead of pretending it wasn't there, you wrote it down? What if you said, yes, I see it, and I'm going to find out what it means before it defines me? That's the turning point most people never reach, because they're afraid. But you're reading this, you're listening, you're noticing, and that means it's not too late. It means your body is still speaking, and you still have the choice to listen, because the moment you choose to notice is the moment you stop being helpless. And let's be honest, isn't that what aging threatens more than anything else? Not the gray hair, not the wrinkles, but the creeping sense that you're losing control over your own body. But control isn't all or nothing. It's built through decisions, small ones, like watching your hand when it's resting on the table, like paying attention to how tightly you're holding a spoon, like asking, did that movement feel different than last week? These are not paranoid questions. These are intelligent acts of self-respect. And here's the hook that no one ever says out loud. If you wait for something to be obvious before you act, you've already waited too long. Because early signs are never loud, they're quiet on purpose. Your body doesn't want to scare you. It wants to recruit you. It wants you to be part of the healing, not just the reaction. But if you brush off the signals, if you tell yourself, I'm just tired, I'm just anxious, I'm just getting older, you teach your brain that tremors don't matter. And the brain listens, it adapts to your indifference, it stops sending warnings. And then one day you go to button your shirt or hold a pen and your hand won't do what you ask of it. Not because it gave out, but because you gave up listening. Now let's be clear, not every tremor means disaster, but every tremor means data. And data tracked and respected gives you leverage. Maybe you find out it's a side effect of your medication, something reversible. Maybe it's a nutrient imbalance, B12 deficiency, magnesium hydration. Maybe it's anxiety that's gone unnoticed for decades. Or yes, maybe it's neurological, but even then, you're better off knowing early because that knowledge gives you a runway. Options, a path. What you don't want is to live in denial until the tremor spreads, until it interferes with daily life, until it becomes part of your identity instead of just a symptom. Because identity is where this story really lives. When you start seeing your hands as unreliable, you stop trusting yourself. You start outsourcing things you used to love doing. You stop baking, stop writing, stop holding your coffee cup without two hands. And every time you do that, your world gets smaller, not from pain, but from caution. Not from disability, but from doubt. That's the most dangerous kind of deterioration, the invisible kind that happens not in your bones, but in your confidence. And it doesn't just affect you. It affects how others see you. When you hide your tremor, they assume you're distant. When you avoid helping, they think you don't care. When you turn down invitations, they think you're tired or antisocial. But the truth is, you're just scared. You're adapting to a body you no longer fully trust and no one's telling you how to talk about it. That silence, it becomes a habit. And that habit becomes loneliness. But here's the hook. What if your tremor isn't your shame? It's your signal to reconnect, to ask questions, to open a conversation with your doctor, your family, your own awareness. Because the real damage isn't in the shake, it's in the silence around it. And that silence, it's optional, you can break it. Let's go deeper. What if the tremor shows up only in certain moments when you're anxious, when you're excited, when you're under fluorescent lights, or when you're hungry? That's a pattern. And patterns are powerful because once you track a pattern, you can interrupt it. You can manage it. You can give it a name. You can strip it of mystery, and mystery is where fear lives. Maybe you notice it worsens when you skip meals, or after a poor night's sleep, or when your posture is off. That's not just a coincidence, that's information. And information is power, especially at this stage of life. Because aging isn't a story of decay, it's a story of adaptation. And those who adapt with awareness stay sharper longer, not because their bodies are perfect, but because their minds stayed involved. Because they refuse to ignore the whispers. And what if in tracking your tremor you discover something unexpected, that it's linked to your emotional state, that it flares when you're angry or nervous or holding something in, that your hand in its trembling is doing what your voice never dared to do, Shake, release, signal. Your body is never random. It always speaks. And tremors can be grief. They can be fear. They can be the residue of years of holding it all together. This isn't just about nerves. This is about truth. And truth, when honored, can calm the body in ways no medication ever will. So the next time your hand trembles, even slightly, don't hide it. Hold it in the light. Observe it. Ask it what it's trying to say. Because behind that small movement might be a big message. And the sooner you answer it, the less damage it does. You're not weak for noticing. You're wise. You're not broken. You're being called into awareness. And that call, it's the invitation to reclaim something you thought was slipping away: agency, confidence, ownership over your aging process. Because you are not meant to fade quietly into limitation. You are meant to evolve, to adapt, to stay awake to what your body is becoming and to guide it forward with care. And here's where the tremor stops being about your hand and starts being about your life. Because when you live with a subtle change for long enough, you begin building routines around it without realizing. You start avoiding writing checks, not because you forgot how, but because you don't like how your pen looks on the paper. You stop playing cards with friends, not because you're uninterested, but because you don't trust your hand to hold steady. You decline helping your grandchild tie their shoes, not because you don't want to, but because a small shake makes you hesitate. These moments feel small in isolation, but stacked together, they start rewriting your identity. Not through force, but through quiet avoidance. And avoidance is how independence disappears. Not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of soft surrenders. You stop, you retreat, you shrink. Not because you're incapable, but because you're uncomfortable. And you think that's just what aging looks like. But here's the truth: it's not aging. It's adaptation gone silent. And that silence is exactly what steals your strength. Here's the hard question. The one most people avoid asking: how many parts of your life have you already modified around this tremor? Without telling anyone. Do you eat with your non-dominant hand in restaurants? Do you let others pour the drinks? Do you avoid phone calls that require taking notes? These aren't decisions made in a day. They're made slowly and they're made alone. But isolation is not strength. And pride that hides symptoms is not courage. It's delay. And delay always costs more in the long run. What starts as a manageable shift becomes a mobility issue. What begins as a subtle hand twitch becomes a full-body hesitation. Because the truth is, when your brain no longer trusts your body to act precisely, it starts overcompensating. You tighten your grip, you move slower, you second-guess small movements. And over time, that tension spreads from your hand to your shoulders to your entire sense of self. But here's the hook: you can reverse that tension, not with medication alone, not with denial, but with attention. Deliberate daily attention. You can practice micro movements. You can strengthen your grip. You can reintroduce your hands to steadiness through exposure, not avoidance. You can turn "I hope this doesn't happen" into "I know how to handle it when it does." Because the goal isn't perfection, it's presence. And presence comes from ownership. From saying, yes, this is happening and I'm going to stay involved. That's the beginning of resilience. Now let's talk about the bigger picture. Because hand tremors don't exist in a vacuum. They can be a symptom of nutritional deficiency, like low levels of B12, which is common in people over 60 and can mimic serious neurological conditions. They can be caused by dehydration, stress hormones, or blood sugar instability. They may point to more chronic issues like Parkinson's, yes, but even then, early detection is everything. Did you know that most people with Parkinson's experience a subtle tremor for months or years before they're diagnosed? And did you know that therapies, exercises, and lifestyle changes are most effective in the early stages, when the brain is still highly responsive to change? That's the real warning hidden inside the tremor time matters. Early action multiplies your options, but delay makes the path narrower, the treatments fewer, the adjustments harder. And that's the part no one tells you when you first notice the shake. But you know what? No one tells you even more: that you're allowed to feel emotional about it. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to feel afraid, frustrated, even ashamed. Yes, even if it's just a little tremor. Because it's not about the shake, it's about what it represents. A reminder that your body isn't quite doing what it used to. A signal that something is shifting inside you and you didn't ask for it. And if that stirs up fear or resistance, that's not weakness, that's honesty. But don't stop there. Don't live there. Use it. Channel it. Let that fear fuel your decision to act while the window is still open. Let it motivate you to speak up, to seek evaluation, to demand clarity. Because your healthcare provider can't help you with what you hide, and your family can't support you with what you never name. But once you speak it, once you say, "My hand is shaking, and I want to know why," you crack the silence. You begin the process of reclaiming control. And that process, it changes everything. You might learn something small, like that a new medication is triggering the tremor. You might uncover a treatable thyroid imbalance or early-stage nerve damage that's reversible with intervention. Or yes, you might discover something bigger. But whatever you learn, you will have your power back. Because uncertainty is the enemy of peace, and knowledge, no matter how complex, is the beginning of strength. You cannot heal what you do not name, and you cannot prevent what you refuse to track. So here's your challenge: pay attention. Take notes. Talk to someone. Ask questions. Stop waiting for the tremor to get worse before you take it seriously. Because if you've read this far, you already know the truth. Your body's trying to keep you in the game. The only question left is, will you stay in it? And if there's one thing your body wants from you in this moment, it's not fear, it's partnership. That tremor you've noticed, whether daily or once in a while, isn't there to ruin your life. It's there to wake it back up. Because your body doesn't speak in words, it speaks in signals. And every signal, no matter how small, is a chance to return to yourself. You may think you're protecting your peace by brushing it off, by saying, "It's nothing," but peace doesn't come from ignoring what's real. It comes from facing it and discovering that you are stronger than you thought. Every time you acknowledge the tremor, every time you observe it with curiosity instead of shame, you reinforce the most important truth of all, that your life is still yours, that your days still belong to you, that you are not drifting, you are driving, that you can feel a change in your hands without losing the strength in your spirit. And if you're thinking, what if it gets worse? Then I'll ask you, what if it gets better? What if this is your moment to intervene, to investigate, to slow the damage and stay in control? Not because someone told you to, but because you chose to pay attention. And that choice changes things. It changes what happens next time you feel your fingers tremble slightly over a cup. It changes how quickly you act when you notice your signature isn't quite the same. It changes whether you isolate or reach out. And it changes what kind of story you're telling yourself as you age, not a story of decline, but of awareness, of courage, of claiming responsibility over what you can still influence. Because aging doesn't mean silence. It means listening more deeply. And when you listen, when you treat your body not as a problem but as a partner, you start noticing things earlier. You sleep better, you move with more confidence, you speak up faster, and you protect the things that matter most, not just your independence, but your dignity, your role in your family, your place in your friendships, your ability to hold on to the routines, hobbies, and joys that make life feel rich. So if your hand has been shaking even just a little, don't ignore it. Don't wait for it to get worse before you care. That's not strength, that's surrender. And you've lived too long, seen too much, and overcome too many storms to go quiet now. This moment right now is your invitation to pay attention, to write it down, to ask the questions, to honor the signal. Because you've earned the right to know what's happening in your body. You've earned the right to feel safe inside it. And you've earned the right to move forward without fear, not by pretending, but by participating. Your body is still speaking. The tremor is just the beginning. But the ending, that's still being written, and the pen is in your hand. This isn't just about your hand. It's about what you still deserve: movement, without fear, mornings, without doubt, and a body you can trust to carry the life you still want to live. You are not your symptoms. You are not your tremor. You are the person who chose to notice, who chose not to stay silent, and who still has the strength to ask, what's next, and how do I meet it with courage? The warning sign has already arrived. Now it's up to you what happens next. Choose presence. Choose attention. Choose to stay awake to every signal, every shift, and every new beginning, because you're not fading, you're listening, and that changes everything.